Aloha and good afternoon, everyone. It's Tuesday, June 25th, 2024, and it is now 2:36 p.m. Will the Committee on Transportation please come to order? I'd like to welcome committee members, Committee Vice Chair Cordero, Kiaina, and Okimoto. I'd also like to welcome Council Member Say. Committee Member Tupola is excused today. Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute Section 92-3.7, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony in person in the council chamber or remotely on all items on the agenda when each item is taken up. Before testifying, each person shall state their name for the record, and we will be limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. Persons who have registered to testify in person will be called upon first. When your name is called, please proceed to the podium. When the timer goes off, please conclude your remarks promptly. I'll then give persons who have not registered an opportunity to offer testimony. Once all in-person testifiers have testified, I'll proceed to remote testimony via video conference or phone. When I call your name or the last 3 digits of your phone number, please follow the prompt to unmute. When the timer on screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires that all votes at remote meetings be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I will first call for objections, and if there are any, I'll call for a roll call vote. Written testimonies, including a testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described in the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones for the duration of this meeting. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 1. This is Bill 9. This bill will amend Chapter 36, Revised Ordinances of Honolulu, 2021, to repeal certain obsolete or unnecessary provisions relating to U-Drive, motor vehicles, and tour services. We have with us William Trujillo, Program Administrator from the Department of Customer Services.
William Trujillo, Program Administrator, Motor Vehicle Licensing and Permitting from the Department of Customer Services. We're in support of this bill and stand waiting for any questions.
Okay, members, any questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed with in-person testimony in the council chamber. Clerks, do we have any registered testifiers on this item or anyone standing by to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay. And then same question for remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers on this item or anyone standing by to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay. Therefore, members, we are in discussion. Members, any discussion on this bill? Okay. Seeing no discussion, the chair recommends that Bill 9 of 2024 be reported out for passage on 3rd reading. Any objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. We'll move on to agenda item number 2. This is a presentation by the Department of Transportation Services on modified speed limits, including near schools and public parks. Members, you have a copy of the presentation on your desk. It's also available online as Departmental Communication 481. We have with us the Director of the Department of Transportation Services, Roger Morton.
Hello, Chair. For the record, I'm Roger Morton, Director of the Department of Transportation Services. And with me today is our Complete Streets Administrator, Renee Espial. We do have a presentation that Renee will go through on this important subject. A lot of action has been happening on the continent in regard to this particular idea. And I'll be available to answer questions, but I think first we could just go through the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Renee Espio, Complete Streets Administrator. Thank you for having us today. This is a topic, like Roger said, that's getting a lot of attention in transportation circles in the US. And we've been doing a fair amount of work here locally and happy to share that and start this conversation in Honolulu. Next slide, Tony. Go up one, down one, there we go. Okay, so just to lay a little bit of context and groundwork, maybe for folks who are not, excuse me, Folks who are not familiar with the process of how we set speed limits, there are sort of 3 levels of guidance that we look at, federal, state, and county, when determining an appropriate speed limit on a street. Just sort of starting with HRS, state traffic code, basically lays out a process for changing the speed limit, and we can operate within there. We can be more stringent, but not necessarily less so. And then our own revised ordinances of Honolulu, Chapter 15 is our traffic code. There are 2 ways that speed limits are set within there. One is statutory, so basically saying like all streets that are narrower than 18 feet are 15 miles per hour. All school zones during these times are 25 miles per hour, for example. And then everything else is set by schedule. So that would be a specific street. We say, okay, here's the appropriate speed limit, and we would add that onto a schedule in a process that's outside of the legislative process. And then finally, at the federal level, there is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is published by Federal Highway Administration, and that provides sort of general professional guidance on how you set speed limits and the engineering studies that have to accompany them. Next. Okay, so this shows a breakdown of speeds on county roadways. As you can see, we have the vast majority of our facilities are 25 miles per hour, 88%. It's quite a large number. There's a reason for that. 25 miles per hour is both our default speed limit. So if road is not posted, there's no sign there, 25 is the prevailing speed limit. Our school zones are also 25, and just a lot of our local neighborhood streets. So that's where you can see most of the roadway inventory falls. Absolutely nothing is at 20 miles per hour today, and you can see that we have a kind of a puka in our ordinance. We go from 15 to 25 to 30, 35, and carry on. So obviously, we don't have a lot of 20 mile per hour streets because it's not authorized in our ordinance. It's something we would like to fix. The 15 mile per hour is mostly narrow streets and probably some parks. And then as you can see, we have very little actually above 25 miles per hour. I think that's great. It works very well with our complete streets goals. We actually are somewhat the envy of some of our peer cities on the continent who are wrestling with very high speed limits and trying to get those down. Our challenge here is really more about how we get drivers to actually obey the speed limit. And so a little bit different challenge than some other places. Again, you can see we don't have a 40 mile per hour category, and very little at 45. I think that's only Kaukonahua is the only road that's sort of at that highway speed. So why is speed important? I mean, why are we even talking about this topic? Obviously, speed matters both to our complete streets goals and as a city and traffic safety in general. There's a number of different impacts that speeding has that I want to explicitly talk about. The image you see on the left here shows sort of your cone of vision as you're driving. So the faster you drive, the less of the roadway that you can see. Just as a function of your speed of travel. When we're in our urban environments, it's critical that drivers can see pedestrians waiting on the side of the road, people getting in and out of their cars, bicyclists on the side of the road. So this is one reason why higher speeds may be appropriate in a highway context, but not necessarily in urban areas. And then the image on the right shows the impact that speed has on your braking time. So not surprising, it takes longer to stop your car if you're going at a faster rate of travel, which of course provides less resilience in case of a crash. And then the next slide about speed gets a little into physics, something that I've learned more about, kind of diving into traffic safety. You guys may remember this kind of E equals MC squared equation here. Thought I would never sort of see that again in my life, but here we are talking about kinetic energy in transportation. And what I want to point out here is, so energy, kinetic energy is the amount of energy that is in, say, this car that is barreling down the road. And it is a factor of mass and then the square of speed. It's not a direct relationship to speed. It is an exponential relationship to speed. So as you can see in this graphic below that I'm sure all of you have seen before, when you go from, say, 20 to 25 miles per hour, the rate of survival of a crash doesn't decrease by 25%, right? It increases by more than that. So it's an exponential relationship with speed. So that's why bringing down speeds is so important in our urban areas, because every little bit results in actually an exponential improvement in safety. There's also a growing body of literature and knowledge that's acknowledging that 20 to 25 miles per hour is about as fast as cars should be going in urban areas for pedestrians to be able to survive those crashes. 30, 35 miles per hour, 40 are just much too fast to be going in an area where there are vulnerable road users, and we're seeing this over and over in study after study. All right, bringing us back to Oahu, speeding is certainly one of the most common complaints that we get as a department. It also ranks very near the top in all of our surveys that we do on traffic safety concerns for the public. A lot of our complaints that require data collection are related to speed, so we spend a fair amount of city resources actually collecting speed data. And unfortunately, a lot of those complaints are in residential areas that are not necessarily high injury locations, and ultimately don't end up meeting our thresholds for speeding problems. So we end up spending city resources trying to address this sort of quality of life issue, which actually reduces the amount of resources we can spend on actual traffic safety issues where we know that speeding exists. So something for us to address internally. But certainly the issue is widespread. Even if there isn't a documented safety problem there, we know that it degrades quality of life in our neighborhoods, and it's why we have people calling us all the time with these complaints. I would also add that, you know, between our enforcement and kind of our cultural tolerance for speeding, we tend to not determine that there's a problem or act until people are driving, you know, 5, 10 miles per hour over the speed limit. And so if most of our roads are 25, we don't really take action until the prevailing traffic is going 30 to 35 miles per hour. Now you can see we are clearly in an area with sort of dangerous conflicts happening. And then I think on this, I finally want to point out that so about 74% of our roadways are local streets. They are not overrepresented in crashes. If anything, they're underrepresented in crashes because they're, you know, not chaotic. They have less traffic, but they still do contribute to 20% of our system's injuries and fatalities. So they're a significant portion of our sort of Vision Zero crashes and our traffic safety problems, but they're not concentrated. So it requires solutions that are more broad, widespread, systematic, less, you know, let's go and redesign this specific area of street because we have a lot of miles to cover with sort of a diffuse problem. So it's a little different than some of our urban corridors where we have a lot of crashes in a very short section, which is probably dealt with more effectively by redesigning that roadway. We've got lots of related city plans and policies that we've done over the years that are related to speed limits. The Complete Streets Design Manual was published in 2016. That recommends 20 mile per hour speed limit for neighborhood streets. The Oahu Pedestrian Plan from several years ago also recommends 20 mile per hour for neighborhood streets, default speed, and school zones, and 25 miles per hour for some of our larger urban streets. We also have a Safe Routes to School program that is consistent with reductions in speed limits. Pretty much all the schools that we go to and work with, the administrators and the parents there are asking us for ways to lower speeds around the schools, and the concern of parents about speeding traffic and traffic safety is one of the top reasons why parents do not let their kids walk or bike to school. obviously. So our current speed limit zone is 25 miles per hour, same as 88% of all of our roadways, not a very particularly special treatment. And what's a little awkward sometimes about our ordinance is that it relies on the driver to really know when children are present. It's a bit ambiguous when you see a sign that says 25 miles per hour is when children are present, but maybe you don't see all the children. Maybe there's a child on the other side that's crossing that you haven't seen. So we have looked at some other counties and what their ordinances are. We really liked Maui County, which is 20 miles per hour, so a bit lower than ours, but much more clear on the times of day when the speed limit is in effect. I found in their ordinance was 7 to 4, but their signs actually say 7 to 6 to include after-school activities. Kauai County is actually lower. They're at 15 miles per hour. You know, they have very, very strong safe routes to school programs, and theirs is also when school is in session like ours, which I don't love. So some ways that we can improve our ordinance just by looking at our neighbor islands. And then for those who don't know, speeding in school zones is a surcharge on your ticket, and that does go to fund safe routes to school programs and projects. And then finally, our newest plan that we've been working on at the city, there's actually a draft out now for public comment, is our Vision Zero Action Plan. There is an entire section in there that talks about safe speeds and also recommends reducing the speed limit to 20 for all local streets and in school zones. And we are working on an engineering study now for the 20 miles per hour on local streets. And then, as I mentioned, kind of strong support correlated to strong concern from residents about speeding vehicles and support for lowering those speed limits in certain areas. As part of our Vision Zero effort, we are developing some outreach materials that are kind of independent of ordinance change, just sort of encouraging good behavior. So we've got some bumper stickers and yard signs that we're working on printing and going to have some processes set up soon to be able to distribute those to the public. Roger also mentioned the cities in the continent that are doing very similar work. We have looked at New York, Portland, Cambridge, Salt Lake City, and a few others that have taken the same approach to say, you know, our local streets should be 20 miles per hour, 20 is plenty, and they've actually studied the impacts of this. And I think the Portland study was the most significant and did find that actually we can achieve slower speeds and lower crash rates just by speed limit changes alone. We all know roadway design is more effective, but like I said, this is a widespread problem and we don't necessarily have the resources to redesign all of these streets. The next slide shows some of the outcomes and details of the programs in those cities. I'm not going to walk through these. You guys can kind of delve into what interests you most and let us know if you need any other additional information. We also have colleagues in a lot of these cities, and we'd be happy to talk to them about their experiences. We did do a quick map just of kind of some random council districts of, you know, what those local streets are that maybe would be eligible for 20 miles per hour if we were to change that designation. So just to give you a sense of kind of coverage, it's a lot. It's a lot of our neighborhood streets, which of course leads me to the last slide, which always comes up, which is implementation, right? How do you phase this in? We have over 7,000 25 mile per hour signs on our roadways right now and almost 200 schools, right? So if this is something that the city wants to undertake, maybe we think about phasing this in, maybe starting with school zones. We do know there is grant funding out there available to do safety changes, so maybe that's something that we could do all at once, and then talk about whether we're interested in expanding that to local streets and how we would go about changing those signs as well. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions for Renee? Vice Chair Kiana.
Thanks for the presentation. I have two questions. First, with regard to the bill that is pending, it says as of 6/19, so has the governor signed it yet? It's June 25th. Okay.
Nope.
But it is, with regard to waiving the study, it's only applicable to school zones, correct?
Correct.
And then you are recommending 20 miles for everywhere, including school zones. And we can do that via county ordinance, correct?
Yes, so they can all be done by county ordinance. Let me separate the two. School zones is the simplest. If the state bill goes through, as I don't think anyone expects any reason for it not to, school zones basically can automatically change with an ordinance change. For the local streets, as I mentioned, we are working on an engineering study in-house for that. So if that is something that council also wanted to take up, we could support that with an engineering technical study to meet all the requirements.
As opposed to this pending statute to extend that engineering waiver
Right.
to all, correct?
Right.
There is a administrative way to get that done because you would look at every place holistically.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Why not 15 minimally at the schools? Because,
Good question.
and then also, you know, in the case of Kauai, you know, 15 during certain hours, and then how do you switch it? How do you have signage that says during school hours and then X amount? Do you know what the non-school hours per mile is for Kauai?
It varies, sort of like ours. So ours, well,
By schools?
any school zone will sort of have the regular speed limit. So say it's 30 leading up to, and then right when you get into the, say, 1,000 feet, the state-defined school zone,
Yeah.
that's when you'll have the 15, and theirs may say when children are present as well. And then those will just continue through the school zone until you leave it again. So it won't actually say what the higher limit is outside of that time.
Oh, so then regardless of whether the school is in session, it will always have the 15 miles per hour at Kauai schools. Anyway, I have to just tell you, because I'm interested in 15 miles at schools.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah, but you're recommending 20. Is there a reason?
I don't even know if we're necessarily recommending. It's pretty, we've been wanting to add a 20 mile per hour zone classification for a long time.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a more incremental change maybe to go
Yeah.
from 25 to 20. We look to council, obviously, for our policy guidance and our leadership.
And I'll tell you what I'm thinking. First of all, you know, people don't go the speed limit, right? So if you do 15, they'll be going 20. You do 20, they're going to be going 25. So why don't you just do it outright, especially since we have a targeted area, right? And then I'm just worried, measuredly means what? Then when we ever get to 15, we got to change all the signs. Might as well go for the gusto, right? Go for the gusto, do 15, at least for the school areas, right? And then they're going to be going 20. And then hopefully HPD can park someone right there and ticket all of them with their increased fines.
Or a camera.
Yeah. Oh, good idea. Anyway, thank you so much for all your hard work.
Yes, of course.
Members, any other questions? Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the fun discussion, Vice Chair Kian. I always try to find like a more balanced approach, so I am interested. I think my question is, I understand the intent, and I know that, of course, we want to keep our roads safe, but if we're having a hard time right now even implementing the 25, enforcing that, and we lower it, how do we, no matter what, I agree with Vice Chair, what she said, that no matter what, there's going to be speeding, but if we can't enforce it, no matter what the sign says, it's going to be hard to enforce whatever you put on it. So I like to have a more balanced approach. I think
Yeah.
20 is a compromise. I don't know. And on the side streets, I do have a part of my district that I have concerns with, that it is, to me, it's too low on the main, but the parts where the schools are, I understand. So I think I want to have an understanding of what the plans are to enforce it. It's not being enforced now. It's too difficult to enforce.
So something that I failed to mention was that in all these other cities where they're doing the speed limit change, it's accompanied by a significant amount of education and information and campaigns. So like 20 is plenty sounds catchy for a reason, right? It wasn't just signage and ordinance change. There is a big push to also educate the driving public. So I wanted to, put a point on that. That's part of the reason they've had success, I'm sure. So I would suggest that that go with anything that we do. As far as, okay, so as I alluded to, we typically don't deem something a speeding problem until the prevailing traffic is going 8-ish miles per hour over the speed limit. And so this circle that we get stuck in is it's 25, we know everyone's going 35, we can't put in the appropriate traffic calming to get people to go 25 because we know they're going 35, it's not appropriate, blah, blah. So if it was lower, then it would open up our toolbox a bit more about the kinds of tools that we could actually put in on that street to get down to the safer speed. Regardless of what the speed limit is, we know we want people to be going around 20, no faster than 25 miles per hour. And sometimes it might help to make the speed limit lower so that we can justify that non-compliance is high enough to justify an intervention. I don't, is that
Okay, no, thank you. I think this page was really interesting to me because I thought that was pretty telling. I was just curious how is this decided? This graphic with the circle and how much you can see versus the speed that you're going.
Someone much smarter than me probably made this, but there certainly are Kona vision calculations that are done based on your velocity. So somebody else did that and we just kind of overlaid it over some local images.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? If not, I have a few. And this is to kind of set the discussion. So first and foremost, this would not apply to roads under state jurisdiction. So Farrington Highway, H1, etc.
School zones actually does, I believe.
So, okay, that's good to know. Speaking of those school zones, there are some schools which border very large streets where, the public is expecting to be able to travel at a higher level of speed. Kapolei High School is right next to Kapolei Parkway, for example. In Councilmember Okimoto's district, Mehu'ula Parkway. These larger streets. And I worry that it would confuse the public if one section is 15 and the rest of Mehu'ula Parkway or Kapolei Parkway is 30, and it seems, is there any way to accommodate those sorts of issues? I understand on the really small streets, it makes complete sense. But, these large streets, what do we do? Like Highway in front of Kapolama Elementary School, for example.
So we've had this debate internally, and I think we fall on we have argued both sides. I would argue, why are children who go to school on larger streets less important than children who go to schools on quaint neighborhood streets? And I have a hard time answering the difference.
Yeah, and I understand and appreciate, that, and I'm all for pedestrian safety. I just want to make sure that if we set a policy, that it's one that's implementable, it makes sense, and we're not going to have a bunch of people going on Like Highway at 15 miles an hour saying, "You city council members, what were you thinking?"
Yeah. I wish I could remember. Someone said they just traveled somewhere where, I think it was on the continent, where you hit a school zone and you go 15 miles an hour. Like, that is their culture, and it is baked in, and that is how that community operates. And we are sadly not like that at all. I don't even think people pay attention to our school zone signs because they're the same as the rest of the road speed limit. So, I don't know, just some thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good discussion to have, and when we have a bill that addresses this, a lot of these things will come up. But I also think of Kalihi Elementary, which is perched on a hill. It doesn't actually connect to Like, but on a map they're adjacent. So just little things here and there. I did want to ask what
Well,
the,
just Tyler, you can think of Kapiolani for confusing streets. It starts at 35, it goes to 25, and then it goes to 30. So there's a little bit of common sense in most of this too, where where you do risk sort of confusing the public if you have those types of things. I think school zones are pretty easy to figure out. But if it jumps around as much as it does there, that's McKinley High School. So that's there's not a perfect answer, and that at the end of the day, the engineers use engineering judgment because there is no absolute cookbook solution for any of this.
and I think that you raised a really good point, which is perhaps the landing place is, it sounds like the department would like some flexibility here, and in ordinance we don't have flexibility for 20 miles an hour. In ordinance, we don't have flexibility for anything other than 25 unless you go through all these hoops. So it sounds to me that what the department really would like is some flexibility based on common sense, on engineering studies, on traffic data, and then to be able to do something that makes sense. Is that what I'm hearing from the department?
Well, the department's not necessarily taking a position on this anyway. We have it open for discussion. I think that what you say is correct, that there needs to be some flexibility in this. Adding 20 miles per hour is a big move for us. If we have that included in our ordinance, and making our school zones 20 is, I think, almost there seems to be a lot of support for that. So yeah, I mean, again, traffic is complicated. And you hate to say this is a size that fits every situation, because it never does. And the providing the flexibility and allowing for the traffic engineering judgment, I think, is the safest approach to take.
Okay, and then last question, Renee, you brought up something really interesting, which is the highest speed limit on a city-controlled road is Kaukonahua Road, 45 miles an hour. But in statute, or in ordinance, we have categories for 50, 55, and 65, not 60 for some reason. But based on what I've just heard, these higher categories in ordinance may not be necessary or desirable.
We should probably look at the schedules and see what's on them. There may be some state roads or something that aren't ours or anymore or something. I am pretty sure there's some housekeeping on the schedules as well. But yes, good point.
I think this is a good opportunity to do some housekeeping in a future bill. And I know that, speaking of housekeeping, in our ordinance, there's also references to speed limits on roads that don't exist, like internal roads and Kapiolani Park that do not exist anymore because it's now a park. Okay, Committee Vice Chair Cordero, Councilmember Say, any questions? Councilmember Say.
Director Morton, just a couple questions. When 2040 is implemented, or I would say enforced, would it be possible that part of the equation would be the multimodal vehicles or equipment that will be competing for the road? What I'm trying to get at, when you see more and more multimodal alternatives, I think the speed limit should be lowered, just for the consideration of the department as part of the equation. And the other point is, how did you arrive at 2040 when you could maybe make it at 2030? 6 years from now, that everything should be addressed.
I think that the 2040 was kind of a realization that the city moves slowly and we have thousands of signs. Is that, Renee?
So the 2040 is the Vision Zero Action Plan time horizon for eliminating traffic deaths. We have a lot of infrastructure improvements to do, so that's why it's pushed out so far, is we're hoping we can make a significant infrastructure improvement to our streets. and campaigns and other strategies, but to help bring down our crash severity.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Cordero, any questions? No questions. All right. Last call for questions for the director as well as the Complete Streets Administrator. Okay, hearing none. What we'll do is we'll call for testimony now, in-person testimony here in the chamber. I see Angela Melody Young here. Please proceed.
Aloha. Council, Angela Melody Young, testifying in strong support of the presentation. So it is super important to slow down and to encourage and educate about safe driving behavior. So, for example, at Bishop Museum and Kamehameha schools, people have no regard for safety and they would just drive in a reckless way and cause hazardous conditions. So it's so important to set the parameters with your laws and your rules. And it's not like we have like a set list of hazardous things that happen. We don't like keep track of everything. We kind of just like take pictures and things, but it's just very hazardous. And also, when cars drive at higher speeds, it causes more traffic noise, which is something I've noticed personally, and there's like a science to it from National Geographic. So like traffic noise and the loud noises can cause hearing loss, stress, and high blood pressure. And then noise from boats and ships and human activity in the ocean is harmful to whales and dolphins that depend on echolocation to survive. So, yeah, I think it's super important to slow down, and our council members were super helpful and active when they responded to this constituent concern and got an idea to build, I think, safety enhancements and to,
Thank you.
yeah, raise awareness about safety parameters.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, hearing none, is there anyone else in the chamber who'd like to testify on our speed limit presentation? Okay, hearing none, clerks, do we have any remote testimony on this item?
Chair, there are none, but I see Winston Welsh online. I'm
All
not
right.
sure if he wants to testify.
Yeah, Winston would like to testify on this item.
Yeah, aloha. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I did register. That's how I've got the link right here, but I'm not sure why that doesn't show up sometimes. Yeah, I thank you for Department of Transportation Services for coming out. I am Winston Welch. I'm testifying in my capacity, I guess, as Chair of Neighborhood Board 5, which is Diamond Head, Kapalulu, St. Louis Heights, where also speeding, traffic, safety issues are a main concern that regularly comes before our board. And we did have Renee SBL come out last week along with Tommy Waters' office and some other folks to take a sort of granular look at a walk there. And part of Kapalulu is one of the 10 most dangerous areas in the city. We fully support not just a 20 is plenty, but that 15 is too fast on these side streets. As Renee was saying, it's not 15. People go 8, 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, 20, even faster. We would like to see anywhere where there's a public bus line, perhaps, that is a 20 mile an hour speed limit on Kapalulu. It's plenty fast there. 15 miles an hour in the interior neighborhoods. It's way more than fast enough. If 94% of the people support a 20 mile an hour speed limit, I'm sure a huge overwhelming number would also support 15 miles an hour. People don't need to drive that fast on interior streets, even on our main traffic streets. This is something that we need to look at. Please give them as much flexibility as you can. Albuquerque, New Mexico has a 14 mile an hour speed limit. Interesting, right? You pay attention. Rather than 15, you ignore. 14, you say, oh, I'm actually going 25 or 30. So it's just a good common sense approach. This signs don't have to all be replaced. Just slap up a new number instead of the 2, make it a 1, 25 to 15. So it's something that could easily be done. We also would like to be a test neighborhood, a guinea pig neighborhood for reducing speeds as well, and look forward to working with the City Council and the Department of Transportation Services to make our streets safer. That perhaps could be a model rolled out for other neighborhoods as well. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any questions for the testifier? All right. Hearing none, clerks, is there anyone else standing by waiting to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, there being none, members, we are in discussion. Members, any further discussion on this topic? I suspect that later this year we'll be taking up something like this, and hopefully we can tease out further concerns and issues and make sure that we can implement a policy that makes sense to keep everyone safe. All right, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. It's 3:16. Thank you.